there are process problems in how this has gone forward, and I think the executive memo that Heather provided for us was fabulous at really being able to see, I learned so much from that in terms of seeing how things had gone. And I hope we never task force again. I think the board has to bear so much fun. Choose your philosophy and then go and figure out your programming. Because I think that's choose your ideology, choose your theory. I said this before, whether the sun is the center of the earth or the earth is the center of the universe, and then go find evidence. And it's a common human fallacy to kind of choose that too early. And I think there's a lot of good work in the AMLE, but I think there's some real gaps in the AMLE. And so by adopting and staying with, kind of, it's the normal human effort once you say you're focused on something to do the confirmation bias and then everything you frame and do that. And so I think that was one of the challenges and made it a challenge. That was one of the difficulties in the process and kind of closed the process to a particular thinking. And then also, I think it's really important to look at the composition of the academic subcommittee. And that's in Appendix B. And when I went through and saw the composition of that, and then there were various people that were selected collaboratively with the NSCA. And I mean, my next point after process is the needs of professional educators. So that's huge to me.
Can you clarify that for me?
Okay, so I just want to make sure
Okay.
I care very deeply about our professional educators and what they think and how this works for them. And I think we have to get a really good sense of feel from a wide range of them. But on Appendix B, if you add up the numbers, 10 of the 17 people on the subcommittee were chosen collaboratively with the NSCA. So if one were to take a mindset of who is on this committee, what's the majority of this committee, what viewpoint would this subcommittee represent, it's the perspective of the NSCA collaboratively chosen individuals, and it completely, the report we get completely maps with what I thought was a great, very useful board comments that the president of the NSCA gave us at the last meeting. And gave the research and the viewpoints that they have. And then I think to really make a good decision, kind of have to read through that and look at it, which I've done. And I have, I think, some areas where those might diverge. And so, I mean, from a process perspective, we have to realize that this subcommittee largely, majority represented the NSCA, and the NSCA viewpoint in their document with their research comports with is the same as. It's different than what the parent group and Save Our Challenge has. Okay? So our process did not give voice to that, and so Director D'Angelo brought that up, or Vice President D'Angelo brought that up, I deeply share that. As she was talking, I thought of other people we did not give voice to. She mentioned basically CPAC, minority, the free and reduced lunch, but students. And one of the things that I got from, and it's one website I have, how do you really get student voice? How do you listen to what the students have? And let's be real honest. Middle school students have opinions, and they have very thoughtful opinions. And if you ask them, so I think we need to do, before we really make a all-in vote on something, we need to have task force focus groups with our students. They'll tell us that they're very able, and we didn't do that. And so I think we have made great progress. I really, really do. But I think we have kind of, it's not all compiled yet, and we haven't peeled the ending back for it far enough. So that process issue is really significant to me and will prevent me from embracing the report we have, because I think we're in the middle of the process and that there's voices we haven't yet heard, and so we don't have enough information to make a major, hard turn on the rudder and change. The next piece I have is the needs of our professional educators. And so we've been in 2 junior highs recently on site visits. And we went to, I think, David, you were there, I don't remember if those, but through the mentor room. And it was kind of amazing. And then we also went to the gym. And then we also went to a lab, more remedial. But it's the second math class of the day, as well as an honors class and regular class. And so I saw a lot. And I saw a lot of middle schoolers, okay, with everything that you expect from middle schoolers. And our professional educators in our schools, in the middle schools, are working so hard to try and find the right combination of program, interaction, the data-driven, reading the books, high poverty matters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think whatever we do has to be so sensitive to their on-the-field experiences and to be responsive and respectful of the things that they're seeing. And I mean that so deeply, being an educator myself, and for much of my life working with what you would probably call in the college ranks the struggling learners, the people who weren't necessarily predicted even to go to college or to graduate. And I love working with that student population. And I've worked with what you might call the ICAP population, and that wasn't the right mix for me as a teacher. So I don't know what that means in terms of as we go forward, but it's paramount to me, because, and we've heard it through the focus groups and everything we're getting with the search process and everything else. Oh, we have great teachers in this district, and we see them in the science program at North Shore. I wish I could clone it, and have it in all of our junior highs, because it's amazing. And these 7th grade kids were able to show how they did this projectile. Like, projectile? Yeah, projectile. And they knew exactly, and they started trying to explain it. And I said, no, it's the center of gravity. And they were talking and I'm like 7th graders that are into it. And then we saw the English, was it the English class where they gave the presentation? What was it?
Social studies.
With social studies, and the that humor. Oh gosh, I learned things, and this kid was so interested in, and poor kid has 4 adults in there watching while he's doing things, but everyone else was, so we have to be responsive to where our professional educators are, the boots on the ground, and make sure that what we're doing is responsive to their approaches and understanding. We also have to step back and look at parents and community support and the research. The needs of our committed community members, and it's not just our community members, we have to be responsive to them, but also our committed community members, because we have to bring them along with us. And if we haven't been able to communicate with them and include them with true engagement, that this is a good path forward, then I think it's premature to move forward. And I think it's such a difficult thing. I don't know if we have, so we had the opportunity, I'm not sure we did. This is a tough, longer journey, I think, is my connection. And so I just really think we have to get them on board, that whatever path we're taking is a great path for their kid and for all kids. And I think it's a 2-stage kind of an argument. I don't think we're at that point yet. And so I think that has to be balanced with all the other things. The last one I have, so I guess I had process, I think we're on the journey, so the process can't be perfect. Let's put it that way. And so that's not an attack on anyone or anything, it's just we're on a journey. Our professional educators are so dedicated, doing so many good things, and we have to be responsive and include and be convinced and collaborate with them. Our committed community was my 3rd one, that I don't think we're there yet with them, and I think we can't push something onto them that they haven't had a chance to learn and understand, and to grow in for both their child and all children. And then the 4th piece is research, and I think when I read through the piece done by the president of the North Shore Education Association, I read through that, and there's 2 bodies of research really. There's been this argument and criticism in that, and it's gone back and forth, and there are these teeter-totters of kind of who's leading, and this happens in research all the time. And in fact, one of the ones that they had put the thing about these, the impact factors. Research shows for meta-analysis, these are the things that have the most impact. Do those. Absolutely. Return on investment, invest in the ones that really make a difference. And the person looked at those and then said socioeconomic status, parents' income was not on the list of like the top 20, which was pretty cool. And there's other people, there's a scholar at Bowling Green State who has done work on the black-white gap and what matters and what doesn't matter. He's done a study on 5 kind of compelling hypotheses of what does and doesn't seem to work. And basically, what most of these people are saying is what we do in the schools matters. It's not that we're given this socioeconomic status, this kid, we can't mold and persuade and change that. And I think that's really optimistic and exciting. You see it when we go out for site visits. But some of the other research in here is relatively old, and some of it, the current compelling wisdom as you go back through it, doesn't support. And there's certain authors and whatnot, so we could go through this detail by detail. That's like a doctoral seminar, I'm not sure it's a board meeting. But I think the balance of evidence, if we really want to look at the balance of evidence, tilts in favor of the story that the parent group is telling us, not in favor of the story that the task force / the NSDA is telling us. And I don't think that's not a criticism like, wow, you didn't read and you didn't learn and you didn't understand. It's that, that you read what they said, and those people are arguing for, tracking, which we don't do, but ability grouping is bad. The evidence is starting to really show that no, ability grouping is probably, there's many good ways to do it, and the model we have actually is kind of almost thoughtfully designed as this right mix, and there has not been a program of ours I've looked as well, for doing something like ours, and so I think we have to do that. So I think, so that my conclusion is I think we're on the journey, and I think it's premature to make a massive change. And I think we should keep moving in the directions that the research and our professional educators and our committed community wants us to move in, and then continue to test and tinker. And I think we're making great progress. I really do.
And to Ken's point, what you said about research, some of the research in here where it said, that was listed in this packet right here, was a blog and Seattle Times article. And I get really concerned when I see that I'm not seeing peer-reviewed research or at least government or school district research. So on one of these pages, it lists the research. And of course, it is my field to a certain, education research isn't my field, but I definitely, so it's on one of these papers, but it was like a blog, Seattle Times, and I had like I said, I could probably tease out a few that were what I would call a credible source, but again, a blog is someone's opinion, or they're just reporting on the secondary source versus a primary source.
And yet, building on that, though, like the New York Times articles that we were sent by a community member actually cites the most compelling recent research, which basically is moving more towards ability grouping. It's actually the right way to get the most outcome for all learners. And one of the biggest problems that we've had, because you get these correlations where you get the groupings and you see the socioeconomic and other status kind of groupings. Certain students are in the high ability group and certain are in the non. A lot of it has to do with the selection process, and a lot of the selection processes are really biased by a single test or just by the teacher, rather than universal screening is the term that's become more able to get the students who, of every stripe. And so I think research is a challenge, but my reading and understanding of research is that it's the balance of the research actually favors the current model we have, not the model that's being proposed.
So I said I had a couple questions, and
Sandy doesn't have any.
do you want?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Because I do have a little different take, but again, this is fine. There's five of us, and not terribly different, but I'm trying to think the best way to start. So the best way to start is going through superintendent search process. Having different meetings with different folks. A principal used a term that I'm really adopting now, and he was talking about, trying to communicate what makes North Shore different and special, and he used the term heart work. Okay, the idea that staff, just like how everyone has talked about, staff has this investment and really being connected to students and really doing not the hard work, but the heart work involved. And I've seen that in my own family with my three different children. I've seen I've seen the benefits of that hard work. And what I really thought I've heard, if you pull it up to 30,000 feet, is teachers requesting flexibility to do hard work. And I've said before, I'll say it again, I also believe, the project management side of me is that no system is perfect. And if we're going to commit as a district to continuous improvement, you have to always be opening to see, okay, are things not perfect? We can always, nothing is ever 100%, what are ways we can make the system better? You know, and that being said though, I agree with the points about how implementation is really critical here. And making sure we understand how we implement in a way that again gets us to a continuous improvement point, not to a place where perhaps we've exchanged one set of problems for another, but thoughtfully gets us to the point where we're moving farther down the road than we want to be. And so where I'm landing is you know, and I think Director Smith referenced something about thinking, I mean, I don't want to make this process any more difficult than it is, and I believe we do have it. We have to answer this question because it's putting so much stress on our families, so much stress on our staff, so much stress on our kids. I don't want to start brainstorming options as a board because I think that's really dangerous. But you know, I've been kind of curious about the idea, and this is something I brought up in another study group. How does our budget impact these choices? You know, obviously we have a fixed set of resources. You know, we've heard at some of our site visits, it can be challenging to find the budget as a principal to do some of the interventions. You know, how are we ensuring from a budgetary standpoint that we have the framework to really do some of these interventions? You know, how does class size play a part? You know, some of the stresses I hear from staff members when they have a general education class that's made up of a lot of 504s, a lot of IEPs, and they're feeling very overwhelmed. You know, class size, I think, is as part of that conversation, which then gets back to a budget question. You know, that there's some things, some parts of the question that I just haven't heard much discussion of. You know, and just anxiety, and I think, you know, anxiety and bullying is just something that we've continuously heard about. You know, that can be a challenge for our students at our junior highs, and you know, I believe that some of the work that the task force is looking to is by moving to a middle school model, how can we make it more supportive of kids to help remove some of those anxiety points, and you know, perhaps the competition that sneaks into our system when kids are comparing themselves to each other when perhaps it's not appropriate. And while I feel that some of these options addresses that, you know, some of the research I've done is you can have kids still do it within the classroom. You know, you can have, you know, Paige Nagara was talking about, the classroom itself can start to track itself. You know, and so it's tricky because answering the academic question before you answer the whole middle school, look at the whole middle school system, for me is a little tricky because I feel like they're pieces of a puzzle. That's me particularly. You know, but I fervently agree that the feedback we hear from our staff, that they see a problem, they see this competition amongst students, and where I've heard kids in my carpool call themselves stupid, say they're in the dunce class, and it breaks my heart. You know, I've seen it in kids I love, and so I understand where they're coming from on that. You know, but we have fixed resources, and you know, only so many physical building classrooms. You know, what's the best way to structure that? You know, I don't know. We're talking about 3 subject areas: language, art, social studies, and science. You know, in terms of how the curriculum really the differences between those. You know, our challenge science curriculum offers enrichment, and social studies offers enrichment opportunities that perhaps we could. And I heard some teachers in the subcommittee talk about how they take some of those enrichment pieces and put them in all their classes because it provides opportunities for everyone to benefit from. So, you know, I don't want to be so cruel as to offer up another option to be considered though. So,
I'm not sure I'd say that's cruel, but we can come back to that.
No, well, because again, as facilitator, I'm worried. I believe we have a responsibility to answer this question in whatever form as a board we decide to answer it. But I don't want to add more to digest, because to use a great phrase you use, if we're on a journey, you know, and again, continuous improvement is a journey, to add another side road, I don't know, helps the discussion, but you know, in terms of, do we look at this differently by subject, is what I was wondering, you know. If there's a way that we could, you know, when I see interventions done and some of the structural components that affect a budget, you know, you have interventions done on math, which is not part of this, and you have interventions done on writing and language arts, but I haven't heard about a social studies or a science intervention. So what if we could look at these different by subject areas and, you know, might be able to, but, you know, that's like in here. So, you know, I don't know if that was something that was ever discussed or if it was just a systematic situation. And one last thought I have, as I have a question bouncing around my head in terms of timing of this as it applies to our equity work. You know, if we're at the point where, you know, we're having great thoughtful discussions with building teams in terms of academics and environment and stuff within all our schools and all our levels, you know, do we want to coordinate these two efforts a little bit more, you know, instead of deciding on academics before the equity framework is completed? Since I do believe that there are some things we can do to affect the achievement gap with how our curriculum is structured, absolutely. But, you know, how do all these initiatives we have, how do they fit this? Not questions. But, well, no, there are questions. They're more philosophical questions, not, you know, what does option 1 have to do and option 2 have to do. But that last point, we have to get to May 24th. We have to get to a vote. It's hard. I'm starting to get emails from students who are worried about this. It just breaks my heart because I don't want students to be worried about this.
If I could address what you said about bowling, because I had actually written that down, or you didn't exactly say bowling, but you know, if it's not this, it's something else. That this is the grade that this, I mean, unfortunately, middle school is the time, junior high, whatever, is the time that kids start coming into their own self-identity, comparing themselves with each other, and they use different mechanisms that are differentiated in different areas of their lives to bully against each other, whether it's what they're wearing. So, you know, I think maybe we could do a better job of saying, because we do mix kids in and out of classes, you know, we see that there's a mix of kids going in and out of the classes. Because like you brought up the point, you're in one classroom, Gianna fully knows, now I'm not saying every kid knows, she fully knows what groups every kid are in, no matter how much the teacher tries. They're not labeled A, B, C, D, they're labeled blue, red, sometimes they're not even labeled, and she knows. She knows she has the hardest spelling word, I mean, she knows. And so, and she knows the kids that aren't, you know? And the teacher tries to keep it so secret, like, but I'm not saying every kid knows, she's pretty savvy, but in that way, but she knows. And so, I think that, like you said, in the classroom, that's probably still going to go on. And bullying is going to happen, and it's something that we have to address over, because it goes on in every district with or without self-select challenge. I mean, every, you know, this is why there's such a big initiative statewide, you know, for anti-bullying laws. So it's not because of this that students are getting bullied. It's going to happen anyway.
I'd like to add on to that, because I think that's one of the big emotional points from the NSDA, both in the people who presented to us as well as their written thing. You know, they end very much not with kind of a logical, rational forms of argument. You have logos, pathos, and ethos, and kind of your argumentation. It was very much emotion. This is what we believe. This is what we're passionate about. This is what we care about. It's very important when we're in a mission-oriented area. But this bullying, I think the research shows, yes, and especially among the girls. It really, and the one article that really struck me, and took me a while to get comfortable with it, it was about this notion that in the mixed ability classrooms, that it really harms girls. And I'm like, well, what's going on there? And then I played it and tried to unpack that onion a few times. And girls do, you know, 5,000 words versus the 2,000 words, definitely get the pecking order and all those other things. And so then, if you're the smart girl and the rest of them aren't, you're going to be treated with some of those 5,000 words if you're in the same ability classroom. If you're a person maybe of color who's not supposed to be in the smart classroom, and you're acting whatever word you want to use in a mixed ability classroom, and you're maybe one of the athletes you're not supposed to be smart, and so if you act smart, your teammates and other people are gonna hammer and bring you down. And so I think bullying happens at this age. It's a normal part of the socialization and learning process. And so saying that, and this is trading one problem for another, I'm not convinced that that argument bears weight in terms of, and therefore, because we currently have bullying about not in challenge and you're in challenge, and I don't doubt that we have that kind of conversation, therefore we take away challenge, because then that will make academics better and take away the bullying. I think I'm not convinced at all that the bullying will disappear, and I'm not convinced at all that that change will actually help academics. I'm open to being persuaded by evidence, but I think there's more evidence to suggest the alternative, and the intervention should be dealing with the bullying, dealing with how you treat other people, no matter where you're at in terms of those academic structures. But that's, I think it's a huge point, and it's one of the major arguments that has been put forward, and I think each of us will have to wrestle with how we weight that evidence, and whether or not we think bullying exists in this age, there's high preponderance of it. Hopefully we all agree with that, because I think it's pretty clear. Then the next question is this particular treatment going to be effective to that particular, kind of undesirable language that occurs? And my heart breaks too when a kid says, things like, I'm in a dumb group or I'm dumb. No, you're not. Unless you're changing the classroom is the way to resolve that, but it might be.
Come across any lines?
Yeah, I did have one sort of an aha moment yesterday at Marshall Junior High. They had a slide and it said electives and then in parentheses essentials. That would be great if we could change that terminology to call them essentials. But along those lines, do we have a sense, we have kids that are already in academic lab with the structure that we have now. Do we have a sense of what the increase would be of how many more kids would need academic lab if we move to a challenge for all model? Or, I've heard a lot of that it's about skill set, not about ability. So does the number stay pretty close to the same? I just would hate kids to feel like they're being punished because of changing curriculum.
Do you want me to respond to that? You're having such a great discussion.
No, but this is why I was happy you guys had the time to come, because these are questions we could use your feedback on.
So the idea of supporting students, when you think about a middle school model, can happen through a variety of mechanisms. It can happen through the mentor rooms we saw, through that advisory time during the day that we're talking about that will be 30, it's longer than what we have right now in Titan Time, so it'll be 32 minutes, 33 minutes. So we can offer support for those students who may be struggling during that time that is different than what we currently do now. We have after-school programs where students can access additional support, and teachers are there to help them. We provide the activity buses, thank you very much, and that's been a wonderful benefit for our students. As far as the support classes during the day, a student who's identified needing special services and has an academic lab for their IEP because they need to have additional minutes in order to reach their goal areas, would be currently is getting an academic lab. And so they therefore may have not an elective option or essential option, or they may only have a semester compared to another student who may have a year or a year and a half. But that's per their IEP, so that's per team that comes together to think about that. Currently, we have the support classes in the area of math through our lab funding, and so we would continue that, and we offer 1 or 2 classes right now per junior high. I see that remaining the same. So it's in the math area is where the lab funds are identified to be served. We've all agreed that math is the area, and junior highs can choose to do it in 7th grade, 8th grade, or 9th grade, where the greatest need is. And those students are rank ordered based on their SBAC scores or MSP prior and now SBAC scores. And those students then have the opportunity to receive that additional support class, whether it's for a semester or a year. It's usually a conversation with the counselor and the parent. We think this would be really good for your student. Semester, a year, it depends on what the needs are and the skill set of the student. So we're hoping to still receive that funding. That varies every year based on our district free and reduced
It's largely
poverty percentage, and it's actually decreased this year, so we're actually we're moving less resources out to the junior highs for next year. The other,
deviate, it's based on percentage, not number of kids, because the number of kids in poverty is the same,
based on
right?
district percentage.
In our district, the number of kids in
Right.
poverty, but, oh, it's running, okay.
Right quarter.
Those students
Per school.
per school,
So
yeah.
you can't serve everybody, so you're
Yeah.
Right.
serving the needy.
No, I meant in terms of the funding coming from the state, they determine it based on the percentage, even though the numbers of kids in poverty isn't changing.
I need to look at the exact funding formula. I think it might be on a per student funding formula, but it could be that, well, so it's always the reality that if you have a fixed pool of money, every year our cost of business increases, so that fixed pool of money buys less every year. What we don't have, what we've seen in the last couple of years, is whether it's in raw numbers, it might be different, but percentage-wise, we're actually seeing a decrease in our free and reduced because our major population growth centers in the district are in places where new houses cost $500,000, so you're not gathering more free and reduced families. in the
Right,
district.
right, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't being dinged by the state because we have a percentage that's changing, but the actual number of kids in poverty is not.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know that to be true either, but I do believe it is on a per student basis. But it is the reality that we have a reduced, a fixed pool of dollars buys less year to year.
Right.
And the recent changes in state law require us to prioritize our LAP funding around K-4 literacy.
Right, and I apologize.
So that's how the math, that's how the
Okay,
in middle
thanks.
schools has been reduced this year because there was less. Then the only other support class that we've offered at 2 of our junior highs, and it varies by year, so Skyview has been the most consistent, that they've offered a section of reading support because the students that they have coming into their system have many, and it's a bigger school, so they have incoming 7th graders that are still deficient in literacy, and so they have 15 to 16 kids where they support them with their reading skills and their literacy skills so that they can be successful in science, social studies, English, and all the other core areas, because we know that reading permeates all of those. So that Skyview's been the most consistent in that. I think Yoda has one on the docket for next year because they have a group that's going to need their extra support. But we're not, the task force has not discussed adding additional support classes. That wasn't the intent. We figured there's additional ways in the middle school model because part of the middle school model is exploration, access to essentials, access to those electives, and so give students a wide array of interests and allow them to make choices about what they want to learn.
I think one of the conversations we had, although separate from this conversation, is that let's just suppose for a moment that we do enter the McCleary world of fully funded, more robustly funded basic education. So just, walk that
More
journey.
consistent.
I'm right there.
Yeah, I think.
Suspend reality.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're riding with you.
So I think it has always been our belief, and by our, I would say, sort of the cabinet conversation belief, that one of the ways we would see that materialize in schools is they would simply be allocated more staffing. So whether that staffing comes in the form of being able to, I can add one more section of X, and then I can sort of incrementally reduce class sizes, or I can add another support class, or I can add a before and after school class. I mean, it hasn't been a part of this particular conversation specifically, but part of our broader conversation has been, we see moving forward, particularly around 24 credits, the 24 credit requirement, et cetera, we know we're going to need to pump more staffing out to our schools to provide more opportunities for kids, whatever those look like and however those might be customized to the needs of that particular school or a particular cohort of kids in the school in that particular year. So, I am sensitive and conscious of the fact that on the one hand, our teachers are great, and I do absolutely support everything they say can. And 28, 30, 32 students is a big load. 5 periods a day. So, they're working really, really hard.
And how many students are, so to your point, in elementary school, how many students are in a classroom typically?
We would probably, if you look district-wide average, you'd probably see about 24.
And then in junior high, how many?
You would probably see,
That
I would
average
imagine,
in high.
between 28 and 30, again, if you took a district-wide average.
So then you have to differentiate even broader in junior high, I'm imagining, because you have more kids in the class, so you probably have more, even more diverse. You probably have more on each end potentially, so you have more kids that would need help or just.
And then the flip side for a secondary teacher is they're likely teaching a narrower range of content and subject areas than an elementary teacher that's teaching all content areas. So there's.
We don't know
Yes.
that we're gonna do that yet in sixth grade though.
Yeah.
Oh, we are.
Yes.
Oh, we are, okay.
Yeah.
Those are gonna go to subject matter experts, so math, so a sixth grade teacher, would be a sixth grade math teacher,
Yes.
rather than a sixth grade all grades teacher. Or all
Now,
subject
you could
teachers.
have a teacher who might be teaching the language arts and the social studies,
Right.
or the math and the science.
Right, yeah, we've heard
There'll be
those.
some level of
Well, we still have
specialization.
that in junior high, don't we? We have some teachers that teach, or is it mostly? single subject?
Not perhaps in a blocked kind of way that we would envision in middle school, but you might have some who swap between both
Right.
subject matters.
If I can throw, we're just another item, and Heather and I had talked about this earlier, this notion of 7 periods and the 24 credits, and making what we'll call the big bang is kind of what we're thinking of 2017. And we started to talk about start kind of task force, I'm deeply concerned that we are visioning the school day where the school district operates for 6.5 hours. And that we go for our transportation that way, and so it's much more of a high-level strategic question, but when we do that, that's an enormous constraint on a lot of the kinds of things that the middle school model and other things might suggest, credit recovery, et cetera. So when we envision, we're constraining ourselves to a 6.5 period day, not providing services in the summer, then I think there's a lot of ways in which we could deal with our struggling learners and the essentials in perhaps different conceptions. And so we haven't really, broken that constraint, I think, in our thinking or in our modeling. And I know that it's a huge kind of a thing, but it just, because I know that was one of the things that came up.
But
in
how
the
does that
middle school
relate
task
to?
force. Well, in
I
the
don't
middle
see the
school,
connection.
well, the connection is.
To the academics.
The connection is if we make a massive change, then we kind of own in on that, and you probably should commit to that for some level number of years to make sure that it's working. And given that I think I'm in favor of breaking that constraint of a 6.5 hour day during the daylight hours is when the schools are open and operating, because I think there's better ways to do things. There's a whole set of different constraints when we do that, and that's a big discussion. But that's the notion is we could meet a lot of needs of our struggling learners if we didn't have a 6.5 hour day, maybe days a week, year, not in the summer.
Yeah, I was kind of going back to what I said before, as we look at, I would see the realistic path as our first step would be doing what I say, which is if we can push more resources out to schools, as we're doing now with the added staffing for high schools, for expanded day options, that same kind of approach would likely be where I would see our middle schools going. And I think they're already there to a certain extent, when we look at the after-school programming that they offer. I mean, it's not a class, but they're looking at it from the standpoint of what's additional support we can provide to students that is outside of the 6.5 hour day. We've provided support in recent years in the form of activity buses and those kinds to, sort of put some structural, logistical supports around that. So I would, whether we ever get to a full-on 7 period day for all kids, that's a big financial lift. I don't know that, I can't read the tea leaves well enough to know if we ever get to that level of funding. But I would see that as our incremental step, the additional resources being utilized potentially within the school day, but potentially to expand that school day primarily for those kids who would need it most. And I think we're already doing some of that, right?
Exactly. Oh, no, yeah,
Making sure to get better and do
Yeah.
more.
Yeah,
Can I
Yes.
add, can I add one more piece? That another, actually I have two more. They're not long, they're not
Start
long.
getting the process driven here.
I know. The other piece, and I'm probably going to repeat this to Sandy just briefly, is that, well, let me ask the first one, and maybe she'll come back for that. Math, so in this challenge for all model, is math test in now, or is math still self-select?
Math is, right now we have the test in for the double jump piece, and that's
Right.
remaining.
But is there going to be the
Yeah,
algebra?
so we would maintain where we're at now, we're thinking around the math challenge, self-select. There is a team of teachers coming together, though, that is going to evaluate that and look at that next year to determine what is the best process to do for our 5th to 6th and 6th to 7th, so that we can look at that articulation.
Okay,
And
and
we
that,
haven't done that.
and that concerns, again, that's another component that concerns me, changing the model in that, that work hasn't been done fairly, but then to change before, we know that, what the task force wants to do, and then go, okay, now it's test into math, algebra, because we went for this challenge for all model. And clearly, the research that I read on this, and I've read a lot on this, is that algebra, kids being in algebra by the 8th grade is one of the, that's where every kid should be striving for, because that's where they have the greatest outcomes. And I know that most of the school districts around us do that, 8th grade algebra. They try to get most of their kids in 8th grade algebra, I think, by the 8th grade.
Yeah,
Algebra by the 8th grade is what I meant.
It's similar to this, everyone has it as a performance measure or some kind of goal or metric that they're trying to move. And honestly, in my reading of the research too, math tends to be that subject area that the research, I think, most consistently sort of parcels out and deals with separate.
the ability group, you just said, ability grouping makes sense in math.
Yeah.
The preponderance of evidence is that that's the right way to do math.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, I probably am not sure about the test-in piece, because in a lot of the things I've read, educational literature, actually, I don't see that. So I'm just putting that out there, that concerns me. And, I know you've done a lot of work on this, Larry, but you're leaving and a new superintendent is left with this decision. And that probably overarching is my biggest concern. We're trying to bring someone new in here, and we are going to have a community in uproar over this issue. That's not a reason not to do it, I'm not saying, but I think I've laid out for myself why they should be included. And I think a new superintendent that's coming in should be part of this decision-making process and be able to be informed of, they might have a whole host of different perspective on this, different ways that they've done it in the past in their district, and I think just to lay this on their lap and not take a step back and go, okay, we can program evaluate this, look at it. I'm not saying stop the work, I'm saying make a decision and continue this work. Continue going, okay, now let's look at let's evaluate this program, let's see what that looks like, let's get the numbers, let's let a new superintendent's voice be heard, let's get the equity diversity piece down, let's look at our free reduced lunch and kind of figure out, what are these populations and what are the different data coming out of the challenge, self-select challenge program. And
Yeah, so I hear that, I for sure hear that. I can say a couple of things, which is one, any superintendent coming in, there's decisions that are made, it's like a board member coming in, and there's decisions made before you came that you have to accept and live with, and it's just part of the deal. The other thing I could see is a new superintendent is sort of the last one entering the conversation with the least amount of information of kind of history of the discussion. And yet if there's sort of this focus that all eyes are on this individual as they're sort of coming in with some greater or enhanced knowledge, that could be a really, in a very potentially polarizing situation, that could be a rough entry.
I don't think they have greater knowledge at all. I think that they may want to shape it their I don't think at all someone's coming in necessarily with greater knowledge. I just think it's now their district.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so, I hear the concern. The other part I would just add to that, and I know I've mentioned this before, and I want to repeat myself, but, I think the commitment for everyone, and I'm speaking for the administrative leadership of the district, is whichever of the 4 options, wherever we land, our commitment is to want to make sure that we give ourselves the best opportunity to be as successful as possible in the fall of 2017, that we're not learning on the fly with kids, that we're not ill-prepared, that we're not behind the 8 ball, that we don't have staff who feel like they're not supported, or they haven't been properly trained, or they don't have clarity. That's where we don't want to land. So, with 16 months essentially, minus, summer months and all of that, there isn't a ton of time.
Yeah.
And so being able to, whatever we do, being able to do it well is a real high value priority.
And if I can move towards the process, I think that there were really only 2 options that the task force found acceptable. And when you look at the way they did their voting and the process, and I think that was options 1 and 3. That when it came back to the full task force. And I just want to say that I think we could frame them, and I'm framing them this way and leaning in one way. I'm always open to the evidence that will come to us, but option 1 is a big change from what we're currently doing. Option 3 is a more modest change, but it actually has this commitment to challenge for all. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what that really looks like. And I think this notion of being able to incrementally dabble, to work with, to build it, and I think the transition from this heavily supported middle school curriculum that says the vast majority of what I've seen out of AMLE and middle school approach is fabulous. I really love it. I love it taking chances and risks and some other things. And then keeping, at least initially, what we have as challenge, building the confidence and the ability in our things. And then I think the block scheduling, seeing it, feeling it, and having been in a school that didn't have block scheduling in junior high and one that had. And I'm thinking, I'm a junior high teacher or middle school teacher. I'm used to having my kids all day long in 6th grade. And then if I have them for 2-hour blocks, it sounds like, the blocks are a little blah. It's like, well, wait, I'm used to having a large group for a long period of time. So actually going to blocks is more of a modest transition to going to 3 2-hour blocks a day with different teachers rather than doing 6 1-hour blocks with 6 different teachers from the 6th to 7th jump as we have right now. So I think it allows us to do evaluation. I think it allows us to get the cross.
Maybe the program evaluation?
Yeah, and the learning on the fly, the innovation. So, and it's also was the second choice of the parent group. So I think we could have community buy-in and be moving in that trajectory and continue to learn. So.
And it was the second choice of the task force.
It was the second choice of the task force, not the first choice. It was the second choice of the parent group, not the first choice. And so when I look at all that evidence and I see it leading to greatest opportunity for learning and continuous improvement, I feel very comfortable, and I agree with the superintendent. I think we should make a choice, make a commitment. No one group, especially those that have the strongest extremes, are going to be super happy with what we do. And the middle is not always the right choice, but it oftentimes is for a host of reasons. And so I think that as we talk about moving forward, I think for our community, if we said, and if the board is comfortable with this, only put forth option 1 and 3, so then the community can start talking and thinking about that, and then we choose that. And then if we want to have an achievement gap type task force, if that's an addendum, if that correlates or if that could be a separate item, if that's independent. But to me, I think that might allow us to be able to move forward with a process that we can be comfortable with, the staff can be comfortable with, the teachers, our professional educators can be comfortable with, and our parents can be comfortable with. That's my hope. And it's not going to be perfectly loved by any stretch, but I think that's a really available approach both having the two as well as,
Please.
Can I ask a clarifying? question?
absolutely.
So this moving forward with 1 and 3, is that starting now towards May 24th?
For the first reading, because that's where I'm trying to go, so we have a first reading,
So
and
for the
so for
first
our
reading.
community, which is especially the teach, the NSDA is gonna come, and I want to hear what they have to say, and the Save Our Challenge group is gonna come, and then other people, and this even moves,
Love it.
okay.
What do we need
So-
to do
so-
to make that work?
So this is so
Move
the
on.
proposal is to, as a board, narrow down the options to start to focus on 1 and 3? Am I summing that up correctly?
Yeah, I think, I hadn't thought about that, so you know me, I need to process for a second. But I think the way that you brought it up and what I like that you said is that it was it's kind of everyone's number. It's on someone's list as number 2, not everyone, because I don't want to say that, but it's many people's in the different constituency groups, number 2. And I like the idea that we could potentially, if the board directed it during this time, add an addendum that we are gonna follow our policy and we'll hire an outside research group to do this, and we can look at Challenge for All and Self-Select at the exact same time. Because I'm telling you, if I had data that told me a regular Challenge classroom was the best and I saw that working out, it would be a lot easier for me to embrace that, and I think for our community, if it really showed it was doing all these things. So it's not because I'm opposed to that, it's because I don't see that it really bears out. So,
So I think what we're suggesting is that as we move to the first reading,
yeah.
is it just include options 1 and 3?
And then I'm communicating why I think I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So
Because
just-
I have to have my 5,000 words
Right.
in.
I'm
Okay.
I'm working
Just-
towards-
So in the data.
So just
Okay.
just for process
Yeah,
clarification,
same
you are
comments.
in a study session, and while traditionally the board has not taken action in a study
That's
session,
what I needed to
a
know.
study session is a special meeting. You can take action, but you can only take action on items that are on the agenda. So
Which this would.
this would
Okay.
be, fall into that category. So if there was a desire to formalize it, there could be a motion and a second and a vote taken specific to anything related to this recommendation.
I'd like to give David the opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll weigh in on 2 things. I'll make a motion that we consider option 1 and 3 as first reading.
Yeah.
All right, that's what we're doing now.
Yes.
Bottom line, David, love it.
Okay. Wait,
Sign on the dotted line.
so is there a second?
I second it.
Sandy seconds it. We say all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Now, can I ask though, at that
I'm
first,
going to
oh,
add
go
a
ahead.
second if I may.
Okay,
So that was the first thing. The second thing is as I see this between option 1 and 3, it comes down to 2 issues. And I think that kind of, Heather, was my request, is maybe get a sense of how the task force came down on this. And that is the Challenge for All fundamentally, primarily, a sense of equity where all students have access to challenging opportunities throughout each course and each day, each assignment, and that's a good thing for equity. I acknowledge that. Is there a component that the achievement opportunity gap is going to be addressed in Challenge for All?
And these are 2 different
And
questions.
that's why I struggle, because we don't see it in elementary. We don't see it currently with our current curriculum at our non-self-select challenge classes. We have the teachers, the curriculum, the students, the ability to differentiate. We're not necessarily seeing a change in opportunity gap, and maybe it's just too soon. We don't have data points, I don't know. But that's kind of where I want to kind of get a sense, because if we look at option 3, as Ken was saying, there is an advantage of having the 2 models dually happening at the same time. We kind of already have that. And my sense is, if it's an equity issue, number 3 doesn't have the same impact of access that option 1 does. If it's an achievement gap issue, why is it going to be different in a year and a half than it has been in the past? I mean, we're at where we're at today, there's a gap. How does differentiated learning that we're already doing, making it a different model, change anything at all? And that's kind of where I went back to, if this is an opportunity gap, study, let's figure it out. Great, let's find some metrics, let's find some studies, let's do some studies, whatever we need to do, let's kind of help inform ourselves to try and make a difference in that critical thing. But I'm not sure that's even part of the options that we were planning to address opportunity gap through this equity.
Can we add to this, and maybe this is for when we're at the board meeting, but Ken's, which is great, about a task force, and maybe it's comprised of some of the people that are doing our equity diversity. It represents all our different groups, that looks at the achievement gap, and then doing a program evaluation at the same time. Can that be part of our decision here, that we add that those two things be a part of that?
I personally would like to talk about an achievement gap task force as a separate item. Because I think it could be, end up having a different scope.
Okay,
And it's K through 12.
okay. That's true.
That's
Well,
my
as we
inclination.
see, it starts.
Well, yeah, totally, exactly, right? So I think it could end up having a different scope, you know. Yeah, that would be my inclination, although I think it does.
What about program evaluation, that we make sure that we attach this policy? Because I think it's really doing a disservice not to grab data from both going at the same time. We can eliminate a lot of this discussion if we, hopefully, if we grab.
Well, we can, when, you know, we do make our vote, we can add details such as
Okay.
those ideas of, you know, I mean, obviously subject to vote, but those are kind of, we do have the flexibility as a board to have conversations about that, for sure.
I think I like that approach of separating the achievement gap task force and thoughtfully construing its scope and intersecting that with the equity work that we're already doing, as well as K-12 or pre-K to, you know, 21, as we have, you know, really our legal responsibility. And then I kind of concur with that notion of the evaluation. I think that's, you know, as I said before, the thoughtful funders now actually fund the evaluation. They give you a grant and then they give you 10 or 20% for the evaluation piece, because they want to make sure, I'm not just giving you money to try, I want to make sure you fund it, because you won't fund it. A lot of times we won't fund it. So, but I think that's a fairly fair recommendation. So David, did you have another motion, or you just had a comment? You had a motion and a comment?
Motion and a comment.
Okay.
Because we have 2 minutes before we start talking next steps, so anyone have any other thoughts or questions, since we have Carolyn and Heather and Larry here?
So I just need to back up. So you made a motion, I need to,
Say
can
it.
you restate your motion?
You already.
Motion to we'll take option 1 and option 3.
Oh, okay, no, I have that, okay, I'm sorry, I thought it was.
All is fine.
Yeah, who's on?
It's good. Important question, important question.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into next steps then. So in terms of first reading on Tuesday, you know, is there anything else the board needs I have to say, guys, have a cookie. Well
Homemade
done.
cookie.
Homemade cookie.
You start, David?
I do have stars.
Gold star again.
You know, I appreciate everyone, I think.
You get the gold star of the day for making the motion. You actually.
You won't have to do it.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so, but then, I'm sorry, back to my process. So we'll have the first reading on Tuesday. Are there any points, I think, you know, an update on the website would be helpful for everyone involved? So, I can work with Leanna talking about the motion. Are there any other points the board would like to have us include in the communication when we talk about this?
I think the community is a little confused with option 1 and what that means, and I think actually the board is just a touch confused. What does that really look like, but to, without being overly incendiary, but to basically say, because some people say, are you taking away self-select challenge? And option 1,
It's actually an expansion, not a contraction.
I know, it's semantics, it's a I know.
Some people struggle to see that, but it's whether you believe that will be the reality or not. To say it's an elimination is just as inaccurate.
Yeah, it's tough to get around that language, but to make sure that the community who wants to be informed and involved through our district communications to basically say, but whether it's, not necessarily taking away challenge, but it's taking away the self-select nature of challenge is option 1. And so briefly, but being clearer to the community that that's one of the 2 options that's been considered, and that is the option, and I don't know how much you have to say, that's the option that was proposed by the task force to the board, and that the board has decided to move forward that option as well as option two. So I don't know how you communicate that effectively, but I think it needs to be as clear as possible.
Okay.